And it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer really standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on podcastufo.com. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello, everyone. This is Martin Willis, your host, and we have an interesting one for you this evening. Our main guest tonight is Mike Clelland, and we'll be talking about the connection between UFOs, abductions, and owls. Yes, the hoot type of owls. I heard him speak at a conference, and at first I thought it was going to be kind of a strange subject, but after listening to him, there is quite a few connections, and it's real fascinating. Before Mike, we have a special guest. We have Daymond Steer coming up from the Conway Daily Sun. He's the one who published a story about Hillary Clinton's investigating UFOs when she gets into office, and that story has really snowballed. So he'll be coming right up. I just found out that he could join us, and Alejandro is grabbing his notes, and we're all going to make this happen as quick as possible. I want to thank everyone for listening to the show. Remember, you can always listen free right on podcastufo.com between 8 and 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And our show will be playing still on the Dark Matter Digital Network. That's every Thursday at 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please join us in the chat room. Now I have a little announcement here. We have a new phone screener. So we're all set up now to take phone calls or Skype. Please write this number down, 603-967-4030. Or the Skype username is Marty Willis, MartyWillis. Evan will be phone screening and passing the calls on to me. We do have a couple of sound issues I apologize for in this pre-recorded part of the show, which is the news. Evan will actually be monitoring the live part of all the shows for sound quality as well as being a phone screener. Well, moving along, here is our first guest, Daymond Steer. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Fine. How are you?
Good. Now, this story you did is everywhere now, and you only spoke to her, Hillary, that is, for something like a minute and 30 seconds?
Something like that. I don't have the counter in front of me or anything like that, but it was very brief.
Now, we're joined by Alejandro Rojas. Alejandro, do you have any questions for him?
Yeah, I do. One of the things I was curious about, speaking with Lee Spiegel, of course, who you spoke with, he had noticed, when John Podesta had kind of tweeted in the past regarding an interview with Lena Dunham that Lena should ask her about aliens. And he kind of felt that was like telling the press, hey, is someone brave enough out there to ask Hillary about aliens? And you're the first one to do it. That tweet was in September. Were you aware of that Podesta tweet?
I think I was aware of Podesta in general, and I was going to ask about that anyway because I had asked her in 2007. So I had known that she has a history with the topic, and I don't know exactly what I knew when I knew it, but I knew that she had opened the door, or
right.
her people in her immediate group had kind of opened that door. Bill Clinton and Jimmy Kimmel, and I had seen some Podesta tweets, and I think Lena Dunham may have been one of them.
Now, do you have a personal interest in UFOs yourself?
Sure, I like that stuff, but I mean it's a very casual interest. If Ancient Aliens happens to be on, and my girlfriend's in the shower or something and lets me watch it, then I'll watch it. If I see a UFO story online, I'll put it on my Facebook page, but it's a very casual interest.
Yeah.
Were you nervous when you asked her about it?
Maybe a little, but, she really humored me in 2007, so I knew that this was, a topic that she would, that's not like random. It's not like I asked her about Bigfoot.
Yeah.
And I've been, explaining it to people that, Podesta had opened the door. Bill Clinton had opened the door. I just kind of walked in. They've sort of been inviting this question.
Right.
Now, did you put everything in print that she said, or was there some other casual comments?
No, that was the extent of it. And if I had more time, basically I typed the last word of that article and then ran out the door for a local meeting. So I didn't have any time to, proofread it or anything. I just had to go out the door. I guess, I just filed it and ran out the door for a meeting, and then the editor grabbed it, and that's that.
Did they give you any grief, your colleagues?
No, they think it's hilarious.
That's cool. And how is the story done? It seems, I'm sure it's done very well since it's been referenced, all over the place in international media even.
Yeah, that's true.
So has it been a major, got a lot of more viewership than a typical story?
I have no idea.
Really? Well, it sure has snowballed, that's for sure.
I mean, it's snowballed, but I don't have any analytics to tell you what the viewership was or if it spiked. We looked at our Facebook analytics, and I don't know. I don't. That may have been for the Benghazi stuff, but I don't know. I have no idea.
When you first wrote this article and put it together real quickly and ran out the door, did you have any idea it was going to get this type of attention?
Yeah, I think anything with Hillary Clinton and UFOs is going to get a lot of attention.
Right. Hey, Alejandro, do you have any other questions?
No, I think I've asked everything. Thanks so much for letting us talk to you. And, it's great that you were brave enough to ask.
Well, yeah, I guess so. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'll take that compliment.
Oh, just one more thing. Have you been contacted by other media? If so, who?
Let's see. Pointer Institute called me. Talked to them. I talked to Lee Spiegel. I emailed him. Talked to Stephen Bassett a bunch of times. AM Coast to Coast. I was trying to do that show, but that didn't quite work out. But it just wasn't good timing.
So Daymond Steer from the Conway Daily Sun in New Hampshire. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you.
So, Alejandro, that was interesting. He didn't seem super enthusiastic about the whole situation.
It's funny how casual it is because, you think back to stories like the Chicago O'Hare story, and that guy was a travel writer for Chicago Tribune, and the story went crazy like this one, all over the place. And that guy was really excited. He's doing interviews. He's all over the place. It was a big deal for the Tribune to get so many hits and everything. So, yeah, I'm a little surprised. I mean, most websites are paying pretty close attention to how much traffic they're getting, so they know what stories people like. And I would imagine, and it would be interesting to know, how much traffic this story is getting, because my guess it's going to be a lot more than your average story.
For sure. Like every day it comes up on Google alerts for UFOs. Someone else is writing about it. It's everywhere.
You look at a lot of their other stories like Powerball, everybody's got that. Some kind of local stories that they've got there. So, this one is probably one of the few that gets this much attention.
The biggest story right now is we lost David Bowie, which is very sad. Major Tom is gone.
Yeah, it's a very sad story. To be honest, I haven't, tracked what he's been up to lately. But, there's a lot of people who are posting about it and talking about it and tribunes, which is appropriate. It just demonstrates how much of an impact this person had.
Right.
And, And so everything going on right now, I think, is fitting. And, I've listened to interviews with him. I'm an NPR guy. You are too, I think.
Yeah.
And I was listening last night to an interview. He's so humble. I mean,
right.
In that, she's talking about, were you trying to do this? Were you trying to do that? And he's like, no, I was just trying to have fun or do something different. Creative people, I think they just ooze this creativity, and he had that. So
yeah, there was a movie he was in years ago. I watched it years ago, and it was called The Man Who Fell to Earth. It's about an alien. He lands, I think he comes down like in a rock in a pond or something, but his goal is to somehow get water back to his own planet. So he brings alien technology, future technology. And one of them's kind of funny. He takes pictures in a camera, and they open the camera, and there's, printed pictures inside. So he amasses a vast fortune with all these quote-unquote inventions, which is alien technology. And just to figure out how to get water back to his planet. I think the government steps in. Again, it was a long time since I watched it, but it's a great movie. I highly recommend. It's kind of unusual, but really interesting. And it's The Man Who Fell to Earth. Anyway, we kind of put this together at the last minute without any preparation. Do you have any type of news or anything we can talk about?
Sure. I mean, I'm so focused right now. We're only a few weeks out from the UFO Congress. So I'm really focused on that. And so I haven't been writing myself, but I'm still doing the daily UFO updates, headlines. And Roger Marsh is still writing some stories. He's written some stories for sightings. There's a California case that he wrote about. This was in San Diego County, where the witness says he saw 3 strange lights. And in the video, you just see one. I don't know. This was marked as an unknown from the video. You can't tell for sure that it isn't a Chinese lantern, but that's what's hard. You never know. It doesn't. It's just one light off in the distance by itself. More interesting, however, is the story that Roger posted today about a wingless rectangular UFO videotaped over Indiana. So this is kind of an interesting video. I think this was taken in 2014, and it's kind of cool because Roger's really diving into the archives to look for good UFO videos. And at first, it didn't look that spectacular to me. But then when you watch the video and you see this kind of oblong shaped, almost like a flying cigarette or something, zip across the screen, it was pretty interesting. So I couldn't say immediately what this was. So this one's kind of cool. This was in Indiana on May 26th of 2014. It was at about 6:30 p.m. And at that time it was still light out. So it is a daytime video. People can take a look at that and see what they think.
Excellent. Before you go, let's talk a little bit about the UFO Congress coming up on February 17th through the 21st, I think it is. And I'm really excited because I'm planning to do a round robin live from there on that Wednesday night, the 17th. So what's been going on with that?
We've got a lot of contact and excitement. I'm really excited about the world premiere movie we're going to be doing. Also, the film festival. We've gotten some amazing submissions, so we show those films. And I should tell people, if you come on Tuesday, we show film festival films all day on Tuesday, and then the top 6 of those will be shown the next couple of days in the evening during the conference. And then you can vote on those if you're going to be there Saturday night at the award ceremony. So we have a long form, a short form, some well-known people that are making films. So we have Jose Escamilla is submitting a couple films. Jeremy Corbell submitting a couple films. Paul Davids, who made the Roswell film, the best Roswell movie. Paul Davids is another filmmaker, Hollywood guy, but he's submitting a film. Tanya Maddenford, who submitted a really popular film just a few years ago. She's at all the conferences. She looks kind of like an elf or a pixie. She wears like these go-go boots and her hair up. Very pretty kind of go-go girl kind of looking. So you might have seen her at the UFO conferences if you go to them. She goes to a lot of them, but she's really cool. And so some really neat submissions, really excited about that. And then, of course, the speakers are really excited about And right now I'm writing up Doug Trumbull. I mean, so many people are so excited. Even the guys who are premiering the film about the Phoenix Lights, it's called Phoenix Incident. This guy is working with J.J. Abrams. And,
really?
He came over to the office a couple of weeks ago, and he's like, yeah, I had a meeting with Chris Carter and J.J. Abrams. He's super excited about Doug Trumbull. And for people who don't know, you've had him on the show, but he's a special effects guru with Close Encounters and Blade Runner. And he's a UFO enthusiast, and he's got UFO projects going on that he will be talking about.
Yeah, that would be great. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, and we'll be talking to you next week. All right, everyone, hang in there. We'll be right back after this quick music break with Mike Clelland. Well, hello, Mike. How are you?
Very good. Very good.
Thanks for joining us.
Good, good. We did not do a sound check, so just tell me if you need me to do anything with my audio. I've got a little headset on.
Got a headset on. Okay. It sounds good. They'll let us know in the chat room if it's... Actually, my son is monitoring the sound as well. So, yeah, it's been a little bit clunky, but here we are.
Here we are. Yeah, and I got a little bit of a cold, so if I do... I will apologize in advance if I will say excuse me and maybe perhaps do a little raspy, dry cough now and again.
Oh, but, that's fine.
So I'll warn you. I warn you that ahead of time. So.
All right, very good. Now you and I met. I went to the Experiencers Speak last year, and I had no idea who the people were. I just went kind of like on autopilot, and I told you this story, so I'm just going to tell it to the audience because it's a coincidence. I'm going to call it a coincidence.
Okay, coincidence. Big coincidence, little coincidence?
And that night, outside my window, there was...
Oh, and where's home for you?
Maine. I live on a mountaintop in Maine.
Okay.
And so I drove to the conference that day, but that evening, at night, I couldn't sleep because there was an owl outside my window. Do you remember me telling you this story?
Yeah.
And that's the only time that's ever happened. Now, I've heard the owl around here and there, but for it to be right near my window and keep me awake, and then the next day we talk about owls. Now, I want to call it 100% a coincidence, but I just thought it was kind of funny.
Well, 100% coincidence. I mean, so are you like... Does it drift into the... So just, I don't know if your audience knows, but I just finished a book on owls and synchronicity. Right in the title, it says Owls Synchronicity, right side by side. And so what's your sense? I mean, are you downplaying it? Are you saying it's not...
Oh, yeah, I'm downplaying this one. But reading your accounts, I was just astonished and listening to you talk at how many connections there seem to be and what the possibilities could be. And I also I heard you say something that you're going to be the first one to say that you have no answer for this. And I like when people approach a subject like that.
I have some sort of foggy answers that sort of maybe fit, but I recognize that they are just a best guess in a way. And some of the, sometimes you'll come up with an idea and it'll seem to click, like when you put a puzzle piece together on the table, it just kind of snaps in place. So I've had a few things in the research that have clicked in place like that, and I tend to, recognize that and trust it. Doesn't mean I'm correct, but it does mean that sometimes there is a, there's a, like a little power to that clicking of how things fall into place.
Now, one of the things I was reading in your book is there's many accounts of people seeing owls. So this goes back quite a ways. And for them to see them and then they morphed into the owl or out of the owl and possibly into a gray alien. I mean,
well, so the subject of the book is the connection between owls and the UFO abduction lore. So the title is The Messengers, and the subtitle is Owls, Synchronicity, and the UFO Abductee. And part of this is my own journey, as far as my own story, and as far as how I've been struggling to come to terms with, these very, very strange events in my life. But what you're referring to, and I talk about this right early on in the book, is the screen memory aspect of it.
Right.
And the way I phrase it in a way is, you talk to an abduction researcher, and you say, do you have any accounts in your files of owls? And they'll say, of course, I've got lots of them. And then they'll go on to describe the screen memory aspect, where someone will, like the classic story would be someone's driving down the road at night. It's late at night. Here, I'm going to do the cough thing. Excuse me. Someone's driving down the road late at night. They are suddenly confronted with a 4-foot-tall owl in the road. They pull up to this big owl. And I've heard more than one person say that the owl is tall enough that it can look over the hood, look look at the driver. You look at the observer, the person sharing the story with me, the first-hand account with me. Now, then, perhaps they'll move on, or suddenly they're just kind of driving again, and the next thing they know, they're home. They look at the clock. Something's a little screwy, and oftentimes there's missing time associated with that experience. Perhaps 2 hours of missing time. I'm just distilling a bunch of different accounts. Now, the implication is, just by the mere fact that the owl, there's no such thing as a 4-foot-tall owl. There's no owl on Earth that's tall enough to look over even the hood of a tiny car.
Yeah, they're like 30 inches max, a great horned owl.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the way they measure them is tip to tail in flight, not standing on the ground. So they're a little bit longer tip to tail in flight. So some owls could be, a little bit longer than 30 inches, which is still shy of 3 feet. So the implication being that they're seeing something that's not an owl. They're seeing something else entirely. Perhaps under hypnotic regression, they might, the hypnotherapist might carefully take them step by step and say, okay, now what are you seeing? And the person will say, I'm seeing an owl. And we'll describe the owl. And they'll say, well, it's bald. It's got big black eyes. It's a skinny body. It's wearing a little tight-fitting uniform. It's got a little slit for a mouth. So they will instead be describing the sort of prototypical gray alien that people report perhaps most often in these kind of reports. Now, that says there's some sort of powerful mind control, because it seems to me that the way it plays out is that the UFO occupant, the gray alien, the entity on the road in this instant, would be putting some sort of psychic, hypnotic image into the mind of the observer. So instead of seeing a gray alien, which would be very frightening, they are instead seeing an owl, which is striking and unusual, but not out of the question to see on a dark and lonely road. The 4-foot-tall aspect of it is very strange, and I'm surprised that people can dismiss these things so casually, because I've talked to a number of people and said, yeah, I saw a 4-foot-tall owl. Yeah, it was interesting. And they won't even recognize how bizarre and impossible that sounds.
Now, has anyone ever tried to put a cryptology, what am I trying to think of?
A cryptozoologist?
A cryptozoologist spin on this whole thing?
Well, there are reports of great big owls occasionally. And then the thing that so to me, I'm not a cryptozoologist. I'm not my sense is that there's something much stranger going on, perhaps even stranger than the simplicity of what UFO abduction might appear on the surface. So if there's reports of 4-foot-tall owls, my immediate thought is people are seeing basically gray aliens that are using psychic mind projection to disguise themselves. I don't know if I'm correct or not, but that would be my assumption. So there are reports of big owls, and even in the book there's a report of a fellow who kind of did Google research and kind of came to the conclusion that what he had seen was a great big tall owl, because they had been seen in his area. That was actually.
Oops. All right, everyone, hang on. I just, by accident, I put the caller on hold. Hang on. I was trying to take a call, and it didn't come in like I thought it would. Hang on, Mike. All right. Just trying to work this phone screen thing out, and it didn't seem to work. So, is a caller on the line? All right, no one's on the line.
Hello.
There you are, caller.
Hello.
Why don't you? This is Donna from Cape Cod. I'm sorry, we're having some type of issue. I wasn't able to add the caller to the.
Can you?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes. So go ahead and pose your question. Unfortunately, what we're going to have to do is hang up on you and try to figure out something else. We couldn't work this part of this call screen out until it went live.
Should I just write it in the chat room?
If you'd like to, that's fine. Okay. All right. Thank you, Donna. And go ahead and hang up if you would.
I can call back. All right. Bye.
Thank you. All right. Now, Mike, are you there?
I'm here.
Mike, I'm terribly sorry. We tried to work out this new phone screening situation, and the call came in, and I was supposed to be able to do this plus to add the caller, and there was no plus sign, so I wasn't able. I tried to just answer the call, but it put you on hold, and I apologize for that.
Oh, you sure wasn't the CIA or something like that trying to stymie your whole structure there?
So anyway, someone is saying they heard me swear under my breath in the chat room. So anyone that wanted to call into the show, I apologize. We're going to have to work this out. And if you want to Skype in, I'll be able to see your Skype and take you as a Skype caller. And unfortunately, we're not going to be able to take regular calls until we work this out. So for Skyping in a question, please just Skype in Podcast UFO for a username, and I will be able to accept your call that way for this evening. We'll figure out the regular calls by the next show. And again, I apologize. So, Mike, can you go back to the beginning? And I know that you are an avid backpacker, hiker, and you've been out under the stars many, many times. And you were up in Alaska. You were all over the place. So can you give a little bit of your background and what actually led you into the interest in this whole subject?
Well, which subject? Are we talking UFOs or owls?
Let's first of all talk about UFOs, and then we can, talk how it changed over the years, and you had a couple of experiences.
Well, so in my youth, at 12 years old, I definitely had two separate experiences. One was seeing a coffee can-shaped object out a window. Watched it for maybe 30 seconds. I had another witness there. I actually drew it that night. Probably looked at it for only 30 seconds, and then it kind of poof, just clicked, disappeared. And I remember I used to say that the lights turned off. That the lights turned off, and I was almost just embarrassed to say it disappeared. And since reading so many, and I knew I was lying when I would say that, but since then I've read enough accounts that I felt like I could say, I guess I can come forward and actually say that this thing just simply vanished in the blink of an eye. So nighttime sky would have been around 1974. I would have been around 12 years old. I don't have an exact date of this. I do have a pretty good date of the other one. It would have been the autumn of 1974, and I was walking home from a high school football game and had was with another person, and I know exactly where we were in the neighborhood. I was a boy growing up in this neighborhood in the suburbs of Detroit, and it was just one spot. I could go right to that spot in the sidewalk with a piece of chalk and exit out and know exactly where I was. We both experienced what I felt was like a orange jarring flash, like a bright iridescent electric orange. It felt like God flipped a light switch up. The sky lit up orange. God flipped the light switch down. All went back to normal. But by the time when I arrived home, which was just a block away or so, it was just a short walk away from where that event happened, my parents were angry at me. They were saying, "What are you doing out so late?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm not out late. It's like it's only 9:30." I was actually in time to see a television show. I figured out how to, like, it was Friday night, high school football game. There was a television show called Kolchak the Night Stalker. It was only on for one season, so it could have only possibly been the autumn of 1974. And the show was over, and the 11 o'clock news was ending. It was 11:30, so there's roughly between an hour and a half and 2 hours of missing time. I obviously, so many years, I can't be exactly sure, but that feels pretty accurate. And I always remember being like bummed out that I missed the show, and I did not understand at all why my parents were angry at me. It did not make any sense at all. And the next Monday morning, the fellow who I was with, we were talking together with a group of kids in the cafeteria. I said, "Yeah, something strange happened on Friday night." And he said, "Yeah, we saw a UFO with lights and everything."
Wow.
And I had a handful of events like that. Well, those are the two striking ones. I had a third one. At this point, I would have been 30 years old. So, and I was living in Maine, of all places, near Gorham.
Oh yeah.
I was alone in living alone in a little cabin or small house, and woke up in the middle of the night and there was a bright light shining through the bedroom window, and I remember sitting up on my elbow and kind of looking out the bedroom window, and I saw 5 spindly gray aliens kind of walking towards the house. I mean, it was obviously they were like coming right towards the house. They were close. I mean, they were right outside the glass, and they were backlit by something very, very bright. What they were backlit was something small, so it didn't seem like it wasn't like a landed flying saucer that was emanating light in the background. It looked like a little something about the size of a washing machine or something like that out there that was projecting this bright light. I looked at it for maybe 20 seconds. Felt absolutely nothing. Totally frightening experience. The imagery was terrifying, right? I mean, these things are walking towards the house, these creepy aliens, and I heard a voice in my head. Now, it could have been my voice, I don't know, but I heard a voice in my head say, "Now is the time to put your head on the pillow and shut down." And that's exactly what I did. Just laid down and poof, I was asleep the next morning. I dismissed it all as a dream, and never even bothered to go out and see if there was footprints in the snow. Now I'm, in the following years, that's 20 years ago now, I have, I've come to the point where I sense very strongly that was a real experience and not just a dream. And I say that because there was a sort of a palpable, weird sense that was associated with that event, like a hyper clarity, a quietness, an eerie quietness. It's like it felt like a distorted form of reality almost, and I have felt that since 4 more times. So in each of those times are in the context of something that one of them was actually in a very vivid dream, which I feel is a dream, but that sensation is very defined and very palpable. So I recognized that sensation the other times.
Well, the caller is in the chat room now, and anyone can jump in the chat room if you're listening live. That's on the same website, podcastufo.com. Regarding screen memories, have any of the people who have had owl/potential abduction experiences undergone hypnotic regression to explore their experiences? And that goes for you as well. Have you yourself?
I've attempted hypnosis a handful of times, 3 times, never with any success. I think I was just so nervous at the time, just trying to go. I mean, I was really nervous, trying to go under and stuff. So
I understand.
Gritting my teeth, so no, I haven't had any success. Found it very relaxing, I'll have to say, but no new information came out. So Bud Hopkins attempted to hypnotize me. Leo Sprinkle attempted to hypnotize me, and then also Barbara Lamb. So, I mean, 3 people who are, kind of known in those circles as being, hypnotherapists that do that a lot. Now, and I am fully aware of the pitfalls of hypnosis and what the detractors say against it. So, I've even talked to people who say this, they've gone through hypnosis, had experiences like that are revealed after hypnosis, and then afterwards kind of say, I don't buy it. I don't believe it. So I feel like I would be my own worst critic, even if I had an elaborate set of visual events, come unfolding and before my eyes, or whatever, before my, what would you call it? My in my mind's eye, and I would question anything that was retrieved under hypnosis. It still could be a valid tool, but I just know enough about myself to know that I would second guess myself.
Okay, up in the chat room is another question, and that is, if owls are the messengers, what is the message?
Well, there you go. That's the problem, isn't it? I mean, so if the owls are the messenger, what's the message? I mean, so the throughout the entirety of humanity on this earth, there's been a rich folklore of owls. I mean, there's owls, scribbled into cave walls in France. Actually, quite beautiful renderings of owls. But the mythology of the owl, the core metaphor is that owls can see into the dark. I mean, anyone, ancient man would have been very clear to recognize that owls fly around in the dark. And are you still there?
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I just heard a little. I've heard a little noise, and the last time I heard that, I got shut off there. So owls can see into the dark. That becomes a metaphor for traveling into the darkness. That darkness then becomes a metaphor for traveling to other realms, traveling to the land of the dead, traveling to beyond the veil, traveling to the land of the ancestors. So, and the owl would then come back with a message. This is what a shaman would do. A shaman would go into someone in the village, or a modern shaman, you'd go to their house or whatever. So you would ask the shaman, you say, look, I have this spiritual crisis I'm dealing with. I have a spiritual problem. I need help. The shaman would then travel to another realm. They may do this by taking mushrooms. They may do it by meditating. They may do it by rhythmic dancing or something like that. But they would enter an altered state and then return with a message. Now, so the message of what the owl's messages might be, I mean, the simplest message, the simplest boiled down message would be wake up. And that's one of the conclusions I call the owls alarm clocks in a way. One of a handful of things that fit very cleanly. And this was more of an example for me. This was my direct experience when I was seeing a lot of owls. They were to me an alarm clock. It was something palpable, real. I feel these were real owls. These were not screen memories. They were owl sized. They were doing owl things. They were in owl places and stuff. So it wasn't like there were no 4-foot tall owls in my experience. But they were saying, in essence, the message I got was wake up. It is time you can no longer be asleep to these bigger issues. You have to wake up and deal with stuff in your life. And that stuff would have been the reality of the UFO contact experience that's been going on. I sound very calm and composed right now saying this, but let me tell you, that was a wild and distressing set of years trying to wrestle with those big questions.
Now, when was it that you were up in Alaska? What time of your life was that?
Well, I spent a lot of time up in Alaska working for an outdoor school, so that would have been every summer for 11 years or so. So you're talking about the event with the camping in the mountains with Kristen? Is that what you're? No,
I just know that you had spent some time there, and
I've spent. Lots of time in Alaska doing outdoor stuff, big mountain stuff, on Denali and on some of the big peaks in the Alaska range and doing glacier travel and stuff. So,
now you hear about a lot of sightings in Alaska. What is your experience with that?
Nothing at all. I have no experiences to speak of at all in Alaska, so I can't answer that one. There's no, and I'm there during the summer, so the sun doesn't go down. So it's been 24-hour daylight most of the time I'm there. So
we have a question that a listener emailed in. He's from Europe and emailed this in, and his name is Charles. And quote, "I've been involved in many times where I've been given an overwhelming feeling to go outside, and when I get out there, I've often seen a UFO in the company of others. As the years went by, we started to get poltergeist phenomena, and the synchronicities would roll in one after another. Then sometimes we would find paranormal interests would merge with UFO interests when the boundaries dissolved, then we would get a port, a materialized object. Have you ever had poltergeist activity or apports connected with to your interests? Unquote.
No, what's a port? Is that he's talking like a portal?
A port is when something materializes, I believe.
Okay, yeah. So I've never had anything materialize. I've had some sort of odd. Well, I just remember having a discussion about UFOs and paranormal stuff. This was interesting. It was actually after an owl sighting. So my partner and I were in the house. We were talking about the owl experience we had the day before, and sort of recognizing that all my research is owls and UFOs are blended together. And while that happened, the curtains were down, but bam, there was a loud noise on the glass window. It's a second floor, so and startled both of us. Very, very frightening. So that I've had those kind of things, but never so poltergeist experiences. So yeah, so that's the one that comes to my mind right off the top of my head. I guess I've had a few other very small things, odd noises in the room while talking about UFOs. That's happened to me a few times. Kind of hard to know, what's, it's not impossible that there could be an odd noise in the room, but it's very telling in a way to me that the focus of the conversation, usually a very, very intense conversation about the UFO issues, and then to have an odd noise in the room. So yes, my sense is this fellow is seeing what I have also seen, not in my own direct experience, but in reports, reading books. A lot of this kind of reports just come from my own reading of books, but also in talking directly with people, is that there will be an overlap between the UFO phenomena and poltergeist issues. And I don't know why that is. And most researchers recognize that. It's a very unusual blurring of these two divergent phenomena. It's a tough one to answer what that may or may not imply. I have some ideas on what that might mean, but so yes, so Charles is if I remember, he is correct in my opinion in that assertion that those two overlap somehow.
Right. We have a couple of other questions up on the message board, but before we move on, I just wanted to say that you do hear a lot of times where there's like all these different activities in one location, where, I don't want to go way out there, but sometimes people are saying they see, strange animals. Well, like Skinwalker Ranch is a very good example.
Sure, yeah.
All the things that happen there, all in one location. It further kind of blurs what the possibilities could be. I mean, who knows? I mean, it's
well, it's so in one sense there's these issues that are part of the human experience, like that get reported, either in folklore or in well documented reports, tiny people, lights in the sky, poltergeist type things, strange beasts, cattle mutilations, crop circles. These things are all, there's very little evidence of flying saucers being seen with crop circles. There's a couple reports. Very little. Mm-hmm. They don't cross over. The crop circle researchers don't really fall into the UFO researcher category so much. There's some.
Orbs. You hear every once in a while.
Orb. So the orb is a UFO. Yes, so that's why I use the term flying saucer. The orb is an unidentified flying object. Plenty of evidence of small orbs, usually not very big, grapefruit size, glowing orange orbs. Yeah, so those show up. Now, and also you add into this, the owls. Owls show up at these sites in these highly charged places. Also. So my sense is, there's like spokes on the wheel. Each one of these little spoke is its own separate issue, right? A crop circle is its own spoke. UFO stuff is its own spoke. The orbs, that would be its own spoke. So my question is, what's at the center of the hub? What's at the axle? Because it seems that the UFO lore is somehow connected to these other things. One thought is that it's merely like these divergent phenomena would be, they would be at home in a different dimension. Let's just call it the astral plane. This is someone else talked to me about this, and it fit well. So if these divergent phenomena like emerge out of another place, let's call it an astral plane, and maybe we can access the astral plane. We can do it through meditation or through dream time or through focused intention, let's say. So we can maybe get a glimpse into there. But this seems to be either home for these other entities, or at least let's say a gateway. They would have to pass through. So maybe just these divergent things, crop circles, have to pass through the astral plane. UFOs have to come through the astral plane, and ghosts perhaps have to come through the astral plane to get here. So it's just perhaps there's just the Skinwalker Ranch is nothing more than like an airport that's a hub for other airlines. So there's all kinds of airlines that come to this one airport, and maybe that's a poor metaphor, but that may be a way to wrap your mind around what's going on with Skinwalker Ranch.
Right. And there was that one situation there where it was like a portal, or they saw this thing coming through like a hole that showed up.
Yeah, they peered through. It was like the nighttime sky, and they peered through, and it was daylight through this hole.
Yeah, it's something really crazy.
Yeah.
Up on the message boards, another, a statement more or less, but I guess sort of a question. This is a quote. I had a CE5 experience whereby UFOs were seen and owls clearly were heard. Have you ever heard of an owl presence at a CE5 event?
Well, close encounter 5, that means, so 5 is direct contact. Well, CE5.
I think that's the C-SETI or C-SETI.
Oh, okay. So that's like that's the like the focused intention that someone like Stephen Greer would do at a night watch. Okay, yeah. So yes. So the answer is yes, I have. I've heard that many times. I've actually heard people say they have an owl in their backyard, and then they get in the car and they drive to the CE5 event, that's off in the woods, and they're, mostly it's their friends getting together to just spend some time in the woods and see if they can. What are the terms they use? Bring in, a UFO, and then that owl, they feel that the same owl that was hanging out in the yard, then shows up and follows them to this new site. So yeah, so it is not uncommon to see owls. So it is actually uncommon to see owls at night, right? So people go out at night all the time, and how often do you really see an owl? Really,
yeah.
Like how often? So you're out, you may hear them more often than see them, but so. Yes, so what that person describes is something that I've heard many, many times.
Yeah. The reason I knew how tall a great horned owl is, I actually cared for one when I was like 19 or so that was injured. I took care of it for a few weeks in my house until it could be...
Really?
Yeah. And
was it nice, or was it kind of a wild animal?
It was actually really fun to watch because it would watch a spider. It would just move its head all around it. We could see a spider move on the other side of the room, and it made a terrible mess of my apartment at the time. And I had to feed it raw chicken, I believe, is what I fed it. But that was crazy. It was quite an experience, actually. Another question up on the message board.
But it didn't get to be 30 inches tall.
No. I looked into owls at that time, and I think that's as big as they get. It was a pretty good size owl, though. It was big, and it really had very strong talons.
Yep.
I remember getting cut by that a few times. Okay, the question is, when talking with abductees investigating the owl connection, did you uncover other commonalities such as contactees being Rh negative or liking excess salt, referencing Kathy Marden, Denise Stoner's commonality study?
I didn't ask those questions, so much. So every once in a while I'll ask, like what your RH factor is. I'm Rh negative myself, and I actually do not use that much salt. So, those are, these are kind of odd statistical blips that show up in the research. And so there's no real good. So no, I didn't go through that, but I certainly, I certainly found odd little things connected to the owl stuff. when owls would show up in people's lives. And it's interesting. There's not many people who can say they've cared for a injured owl. And I have a handful of reports of UFO abductees that had, who had an owl at his house and was caring for an injured owl. This was well after his first and most major event was Kenneth Arnold.
Wow, really?
Cared after an injured owl, which is very interesting. And this isn't in the book so much, but I've done a lot of research on Kenneth Arnold. Now, Kenneth Arnold saw I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but more UFOs than just that initial event. And then in the late 60s, and no one has reported this because I found it one reference with interview with him, and I haven't heard anyone else reference this. In the late 60s, Kenneth Arnold came forward and said he had telepathic communication with the craft that were flying over Mount Rainier in 1947. Really? So 47 to 67, it's over 20 years later. So I think it was 68 or 69, this interview. And he very clearly states that in this interview that he had telepathic communication, nonverbal, mind-to-mind communication with these entities, and felt that they were communicating with him, which is fascinating to me because that is what abductees say. And he's had a number of other experiences in his life that he became fascinated with synchronicities. He became, he saw, I believe he saw an orb in his house, if I've got this correct. So that's the kind of things that abductees will say. So very cautiously, because I have no proof, I can't give an answer to this kind of thing, but very cautiously, speculating that perhaps Kenneth Arnold, who had a huge impact on how the UFO or flying saucer, I want to use the word craze because that's exactly what he ushered in a way with his sighting. He had a huge impact on the psyche of the American mind, or actually the global mind in a way, because his was the first wildly popular account that ever made it into press.
Right. I'm wondering if Kenneth Arnold didn't come forward with that because it was like very shortly after, within weeks, there were sightings everywhere. I'm wondering
there were sightings everywhere, yeah.
I'm wondering if he'd still have any type of fame as he does, or if that phrase "flying saucer" would have ever been coined.
Well, the weird thing is, so he coined the term "flying saucer," where what he described actually was chevron shaped, kind of a little wing, a little chevron shape, yeah, or a boomerang perhaps shape. He used the term chevron shape, but the and he said they moved as if a saucer skipping over water.
Right.
So somehow that got transposed into flying saucer in the tabloid headlines. Now, what is very strange is afterwards, that's exactly what people reported and photographed and ever been reporting for the last 70 years is flying saucers.
And his, like you said, weren't even saucer shaped.
Very interesting, isn't it?
It really
and then
is.
The fact that he, who's pulling the strings of reality when you actually try to untangle, like the strangeness of how this stuff emerges.
Wow. Yeah. Exactly. And I've never heard that part. I know that he was involved in an investigation.
The Maury Island event. Yeah, he investigated that and met Fred Krisman and. I can't remember the other fellow's name. There was that was part of on the boat itself when the donut-shaped flying saucers, started sort of belching out this hot molten aluminum slag that killed a dog even. So
well, now I'm hearing that whole thing was a hoax, and I've had I thought it was someone trying to just plain debunk, but from what I understand, the whole situation has been basically debunked by that it was a hoax. I can't remember the name of the book now. I read it. Kenneth Arnold did write a book about his investigation into that account. And there are some very strange things that if it is a hoax, it is a very elaborate hoax. It would be, wouldn't it?
There's and then the purported Air Force plane.
Right.
That
they went back with some evidence, supposedly.
Crashed in the mountains of Washington State.
Yeah, it's a crazy story.
Crashed on the very day that
they
the
left.
Air Force became the Air Force. Up until that point, it had been the Army Air Corps. The day they basically got their own desk at the Pentagon was the day of that crash. So the people on that plane are the first Air Force officers to die in a plane crash on the very day that the end of the Army Air Corps and the beginning of the Air Force.
I had no idea. Wow.
So I mean, there's all these things I suspect it very well could have been somewhat of a hoax. But if it's a hoax, it's an elaborate hoax.
Right. And speaking of synchronicities, someone on the message board wants to know if you would please connect the owls with synchronicity.
Well, synchronicity is a term coined by Carl Jung. I could look up the exact definition he gave. It's the coming together of inner and outer events in a way that are meaningful to the observer. I'm doing a poor job of that. I'm doing that from memory. The simpler definition would be a coincidence that has meaning to the observer. So, and then a simpler, even than that is to me, synchronicities are a form of, like, they're magical to me. So can I, I have a whole chapter on synchronicity and owls, and I can't think of a single thing right now off the top of my head. So sure, here's one. So the film crew, which is, this movie is out now. It's available for rent online. It's quite good, called Time is Art, and it's a movie documentary about synchronicity. And while the filmmakers, they were shooting murals, it was sort of an artistic approach to filmmaking and the documentary style. So it's quite engaging. I mean, as far as it's a quite creative documentary, and I praise it highly. It's not a dry, boring, static documentary. It's a very visual, creative work. They went on location into the Mission District of San Francisco and were shooting murals, and some of these murals had owls in them. So they're shooting murals with owls in them, and they have little close-ups of owls in the documentary. After shooting these murals with owls in them, they set the camera down, still running, and they unknowingly got footage of what I can only call a UFO. Looks like kind of a boxy, not like quite like a true disc shape. It's only seen for about 4 or 5 seconds, very clear in the bright daylight, kind of moves in a very smooth motion behind a tree and then is gone. I've talked to the filmmaker, the woman who worked on the production. I think she's a producer. She was right there. She said, no way, we did not know we caught this footage. We did not hoax this. I trust her. So here there's a blurring here of all three. We have owls in the form of artistic renderings on these murals, a UFO, and a synchronicity of catching them both together. The synchronicity of the owl blurs very quickly with the presence of the UFO, which blurs very quickly with the the owl. So at some point in the book, as I was writing it, I mean, these things all blurred together. I couldn't even keep track of which was which at a certain point. I would type in owl when I meant to type in UFO, that kind of thing. Because they just became one, sort of amorphic, mush in my mind as I tried to wrestle with these ideas.
Now, there were some other people that accounted. I mean, Whitley Strieber talks about an owl. I've heard, before I ever heard about you or any of your work, I heard other people talking about owls and thinking that there's some type of connection. Is this something you've been working on for many years? And you are known as the owl guy, I see.
I'm actually that's sort of, I've come to be known as the owl guy just because I've put this as the center of my focus. So in the 2006, I had a bunch of really profound sightings, multiple owls, a couple days apart, with the same person. Very prescient moment when the owls first showed up. We were talking about God, so these things are, which I can't separate from the, so I've had other people say, well, it's not unusual to see owls in the woods. And I'm like, come on, we were talking about God, right? When we were talking about, having this deep conversation, these owls show up, and then the moment the owls were showing up, I had this kind of gut knowing, this voice in my head that says this has something to do with the UFOs. So I was very, very, so this is my own journey. And then from that point on, it would have been the autumn of 2006, I just saw owls. I was seeing so many owls up through around 2010. It was kind of out of hand at a certain point. And these were all real owls. These would fall into, these were not, screen memories, all normal size and such. Now, what was the question? I kind of got blurred out of I kind of got to rein me in sometimes if I
You have to rein me in too. And I was talking about other people's accounts of seeing owls. I brought up Willis Steer.
Well, Willis Steer is as far as where they show up in the literature, there's little accounts. So you get a UFO book, right? A big, thick UFO book. It's an inch and a half thick. A few hundred pages. You hold communion in your hand, right? And then there's owls in it, but it's only a couple paragraphs. Talk about owls. This big, thick book with a lot of dense information in it. Owls show up in that book, only a couple paragraphs. That's something I've noticed. And now, what most often, though sometimes people will say, like, I had an odd experience with owls, but most often these experiences are in the form of a screen memory. Now, the account that Willis Steer tells in Communion, so he had an initial sort of awakening event, let's call it, on the night of Christmas Day. I think it was right. I think would have been the morning of December 26th, 1985. Okay, he had that's when he had what we might call a UFO abduction experience in his bedroom. The next morning, he told his wife Anne. He said he thought he saw an owl. He felt sure he saw an owl peering in the window on the window ledge. His sense was that it was owl-sized. And now this was in wintertime, obviously, in upstate New York. Now the window ledge would have had snow on it, and so did the roof line below. So, and it had snowed a couple days earlier and it had been calm. So if there had been an owl, it would have to have left prints in the windowsill. There were no prints. The snow was undisturbed. So that really. That his wife was like, listen, what you're describing couldn't have been there because there's no footprints. And he recognized right away that implied something else had happened. So this is, was that a screen image put into his mind? Was there a holographic owl? I have no idea. I can't answer these questions. But what I can say is that account in a very popular book. That book sold millions of copies, hugely influential book. That book has forever tied owls to the UFO abduction lore. And with that, in my opinion, I think that the owls that were part of Twin Peaks, for instance, that showed up in the plot, the owls there would be related to, would be traced right back to Willis Steer's book Communion, as well as the movie The Fourth Kind. I think that just lifted stuff from the literature and all that stuff. The very first mention of it goes back to Willis Steer's book. The book was published in 1987. Now, there very well may have been other things in print before then. I simply haven't been able to find them, and I've looked pretty hard.
So that's it for the first part of the show. If you'd like to listen to the entire show, plus other full shows in archives and future shows, of course, and listen on your media player, iPhone, etc. It's a real easy sign-up, just $2 a month or more, just under a cup of coffee per month, and you can help us. We do have a lot of expenses, and we're also going out to Phoenix in a couple of weeks. So that's it. Thanks so much for listening, and next week we have Joe Lewells on. And his topic is DNA, religion, and UFOs. I want to thank a few people. Peggy Shunning for managing the Facebook page. Remember to like us on Facebook for all the latest UFO news. Evan Willis, my son, helped out phone screening. Unfortunately, it didn't work out this time. We're going to get all the bugs worked out. and make a smoother operation for next time, hopefully next week. Also want to thank Carrie Lloyd Whitehouse for the music, Bruce Rainier for the music. We're going to get more of his music back going here again. Well, thanks so much, everyone. And I've been contacted by someone saying that another podcast has been saying, keep your eyes to the skies. So I'm going to try to say something different. I don't know how it goes. But anyway, we'll see you here next week, right here on podcastufo.com. You can listen live for free, remember, always, the whole shows. And so that's it next week. Keep your eyes to what flies in the skies. Is that still plagiarism? I'm not sure. Talk to you next week.